quite literally hiring anybody who could hold a pencil. And I qualified, just barely.
Let's start way back at the beginning. As a young comics fan, there were two guys that were the be-all, end-all for you. Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. How did they influence you as an artist, just trying to find your way?
They were the best storytellers, by hands down. Marvel worked in a different method where Stan worked up a plot synopsis, where DC, they gave you a full script. And Jack and Steve, they developed storytelling techniques that they came up with from watching films, TV, just real life, that didn't get exercised that much over at DC. There were some exceptions. Kanigher and Kubert on the war books were very good storytellers.
Yeah.
But most of the time it was just the image over at DC, where it was the story at Marvel. They sort of formed how I tell a yarn, and though they weren't the things I used to read as a kid, because back at that point all the Marvel books were monster books. I started off with revivals of Green Lantern and The Flash, and before that it was just Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman.
Sure, the pre-Silver Age era, when it was just the one and done, silly comics era, like late 50s?
Late 50s, just after the Senate hearings and when all the real good cartoonists ran off from the hills.
It's funny you talk about how Stan and Jack's method and how different from DC, how that influenced you. I've talked to certain guys from Marvel's earlier days who talk about the Marvel method and how it made them better artists and storytellers, because they had a lot more responsibility to develop the story from the one-page synopsis or the one paragraph. Do you think the Marvel method made Jim Starlin a better storyteller?
That and the fact that I came in when Marvel was expanding from like 8 books to 20 books a month. So they were quite literally hiring anybody who could hold a pencil. And I qualified, just barely. Is also the fact that Roy Thomas, who was the editor at the time, was so busy that he couldn't really keep an eye on everything. And if the book was working okay as far as he was concerned, he would pay no attention to it. So with Captain Marvel and Warlock, I was able to fly wherever I wanted to, and I really think it was the best time ever to be a cartoonist.
That time period was really interesting. It was before creator-owned books, and every month, artists like yourselves and the writers you would work with would create characters every month. Every month, new characters would come out. I mean, in Iron Man 55, you created 2 characters that would become integral parts of the Marvel Universe, Thanos and Drax the Destroyer. At what point did you start, or did anybody in Marvel start realizing, wow, this Thanos guy's really got a following, he's really connected? Because this was pre-internet, pre-instant social media reaction. So would you guys get fan letters and say, hey, Thanos is awesome?
We would get some fan letters like that, but I don't think anyone really appreciated what Thanos' possibility was until Joss Whedon decided to throw him into the end of that Avengers movie. They all would, whenever I came back and did a Thanos story for Marvel, they always sold quite well, but they weren't the X-Men, they weren't Spider-Man. I myself never thought he'd see the silver screen just because he's so weird and esoteric. Very surprised when they said, you got to go see this Avengers movie, and I go, okay. And there he was at the end. I'd heard about it the day before or something like that. It was really quite funny because we went to a late night show to see it, and directly behind us was about 8 comic book fans and cartoon fans, very distinct. But they only had 2 voices between them, so I thought it was just 2 people all this time, and they chatted throughout the movie going, oh, look, it's Hawkeye, or something like that. And then finally at the end, the comic book fans in unison all said, it's Thanos. And then the cartoon fans went, who's Thanos?
Mortality is is a recurring theme with a lot of the cosmic books, especially in relation to Thanos, obviously. Why is that such an endlessly fascinating topic to explore and revisit in your work?
Well, Norman Mailer said, every true story ends in death. And these guys are, the characters we're supposed to be playing with, are playing games that are high stakes, mortal, and if occasionally somebody doesn't die off, it's not real. And so, you know, there's been I've done in a few characters along the way, and Warlock and Captain Marvel, you know, were one of them. Warlock has come back, but Captain Marvel and Robin, they stayed dead for a while.
Yes, let's not forget that you were the one that put Robin in the ground.
Yeah, much to my chagrin. That worked out well on sales, not so well for me though. They suddenly realized after he killed him off, they had all these lunch boxes, pajamas with Robin's picture on it. So within 6 months, I was out of DC. But it was okay. I went over to Marvel, back over to Marvel, and I did the Infinity Gauntlet then, so it worked out.
Tell me about the Death in the Family storyline. Like, how did the idea for that come about?
Well,
whose fault is it? Is it all yours, or are you taking the blame for the editor?
It's a mixed bag. When I started writing Batman, I avoided using Robin because it always considered the idea of fighting crime in a dark gray and black outfit while you send the kid out in primary colors. Didn't just qualify as child abuse, it was downright endangerment. And so I never used him. And Denny, who was the editor at the time, Denny O'Neil, he finally said, you got to use him on a couple books, and so we did. And at that time, DC had this idea they were going to do an AIDS book, an AIDS education book. And so they put a box out and wanted everybody to put in suggestions of who should contract AIDS and perish in the comic books. I stuffed it with Robin. They realized it was all my handwriting, so they ended up throwing all my things out. And it ended up with Jimmy Olsen. He was supposed to contract AIDS. And then somebody found out that the actor who was playing in the current Superman movies was gay, and they decided that wasn't a good idea, and the project never happened. But about 6 months later or so, Denny came up with this idea of the call-in thing. Call in the votes, because it was a way for DC to make 25 cents a call or something like that. I mean, it seemed like a really good idea. And so he approached me.
Every penny counts.
He approached me and said, you think we can write up a thing where we maybe kill off Robin, like you've been lobbying for the last 6 months? And I went, oh, sure. And so we did write 2 different endings. There was like the last 2 pages were alternative endings. And got put together. I was off in Mexico when the voting took place and didn't find out about it until I came back. And found out that, just as I expected, my ghoulish little fans voted him dead. But by a much smaller margin than I imagined. It was only like 72 votes. It
was close.
Yeah, I mean, it was out of 10,000, so statistically it was next to nothing.
Do you think the fans made the right choice? Because having written both endings?
Well, DC's got a new character called Red Hood out of the deal, so I think the company benefited at least some way out of it. Even if they did get stuck with a few pajamas that they couldn't sell.
So you leave DC. Apparently you were chased out because of leaving them.
Yeah, just sort of things dried up. Things sort of dried up, yeah.
So you go back to Marvel, and then you do something completely different from the Batman books. You go ultra cosmic with this mega crossover, the Infinity Gauntlet.
Well, it started off with the Silver Surfer.
Silver Surfer,
yeah.
And then you jump with Ron Lim. Great marriage of mindsets. You're the master of the cosmic, storyline, and he was really great at bringing that to life on the page. And then you do the Infinity Gauntlet crossover. And I know you said that you're always surprised when something you do sells well, but come on, you had to know that book was going to be a blockbuster.
We were heading in that direction. I came onto the Surfer because of poor sales, and the sales began to go up. And at that point, the Permletter Group owned the comic book company. It was a time where they were squeezing every cent that they could out of the readership. I think every X-Men had his own title at that point. And so Surfer started selling well, and they said, well, let's do some spin-off, and that was how the Thanos Quest came. And the Thanos Quest went really well. So they said, what can you do more? And I said, can I play with some of the other characters? And at first, most of the editors, there was a number of editors at that point, not just one single one. Most of them didn't want me using their characters, especially the X-Men editor. That's why we were limited down to, I think, Wolverine and Cyclops, maybe.
Sure, because Wolverine was in every single Marvel book at the time.
Yeah, they couldn't keep him out. We got the book, and it sold well. And later on, when we did the Infinity War, which was the sequel, instead of everyone trying to keep their characters out, everyone was insisting that we jam them in. And it was really a nightmare, because we were trying to do a story where everybody had an evil doppelganger. And so getting all the Marvel characters that they wanted in there was quite a challenge.
What's the relationship like between the film guys and the creators of the comics that they're sourcing and adapting? Do they call you up and ask for advice on, you know, getting in the head of the characters, nothing like that?
No, no, there's a definite wall between the comics and the movie people. I'm not quite sure the reasoning for it, but it's always been that way. So, no, I've only met the movie people themselves at the premieres and stuff like that. You know, Marvel Entertainment invited us down to the set of the filming of the 4th Avengers movie, whatever it's going to be called. But, you know, most of the time it's all post connections.
How was it seeing these characters that you brought to life on the page, bigger than life on the screen? Thanos and Gamora and Drax.
It's different with each one. Thanos, we've yet to see what we have. I mean, I have a fairly good idea what's going on there from talking with the writers. Gamora, she was right on. She's still pretty much what I did there. Drax, on the other hand, is this really interesting little combination that Batista and Gunn came up with. It's sort of a mash between my dumb Drax from the Infinity Watch and this newer version that they have running around. So it's a creature all into itself, and I find it kind of interesting and hilarious also. This last movie, he stole the show. Now.
He was really funny at this one.
Was.
He was.
I think the Marvel movies, you know, through Feige has realized that, you know, you want to give the material you're working on the respect it deserves, but you don't want to be so grim and loyal to it that you're going to alienate the people who are coming to see a movie. And they're basically coming to be entertained. And I think they've worked out the right formula for it. And it was sort of reflects mine. Maybe prejudice on my part for thinking that way, but you know, I always enjoyed the ups and downs.
It's interesting to hear you say that you're fine with them not making a slavish adaptation of the Infinity Gauntlet, and just kind of sticking true to the general theme of it while doing what you need to do to make it a successful film. Because I think, you know, some fans still struggle with that, but I think, you know, they've done a good job of keeping the core of the story there and the characters, and, you know, changing it up enough that makes it interesting.
Yes, when we went out to the set, I didn't figure we were going to get much information because
we're getting all the secrets now.
No, you're not going to get
Spill the
any.
beans. Come on.
I've had to sign a non-disclosure form, but this is something that I've let out before. Went down there figuring that I'd have no idea, you know, no one was going to tell me anything because they all had to sign the same forms. What I didn't realize that everybody on the set had been dying for 1.5 years during this previous shoot to talk to anybody that they could about it. So we showed up there, and you know, the directors and the writers, they said, "Oh, come here." And I was really curious how they were going to end it, because in the comic book, it's Warlock who ends up with the Infinity Gauntlet, but he's not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, you know, I figured this was the one thing I wasn't going to learn about, and they hauled me off into a trailer and told me I was blown away by this. So we were really treated quite nicely down there, and had ourselves a great time, and I've run off on the thing where I've lost track of your question. If there was one.
I was trying to get you to spill some secrets.
Well, that's not going to happen.
But you stuck to your NDA. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. You'll tell me afterwards, okay?
Over drinks.
Over drinks, I'll get you to tell me what they told you in that trailer.
Yeah.
Recently, you mentioned that you had a falling out with Marvel Publishing over a series that you had been working on, dealing with Thanos. What's the update on that? Is there a resolution to that? Will we see that Thanos story that you were working on come out at any time?
The Thanos story is still in the works. Alan Davis is drawing it. My association with Disney and Marvel Entertainment has been terrific. They've treated me generously and respectfully. Marvel Editorial, on the other hand, has sort of developed their own attitude. I regretted it sort of ended the way it did. I mean, I deeply regret the way it ended.
Do you think there's a chance that those fences can be mended and you could go back to work with them? Because you're so close identified with Marvel Comics.
No, I think we're done here now. You know, it was their right and their decision to get other people to write all the books that are coming out when the movie did. I mean, it's their character. What I took exception to was I accidentally found out what the plot was to the Thanos ongoing that was going to appear before the graphic novels that Alan Davis and I were working on. And that editor of that book started on his own volition telling me what the plot was, and I went, well, that's the exact same plot that we have for the Thanos story arc in the graphic novels. And so I checked to see if he had gotten it approved through the editorial system. He said he had, so I started complaining, and they had only started on it 2 weeks before, so there was plenty of time to fix it just by saying, well, this character is this instead of that. Instead, they puttered around for a month, procrastinating, at first denying that it was anything like it. I'm not going to ruin either my or Donny Gates' story by telling you all the similarities, but especially the ending was quite strikingly the same. And they never did anything they never lifted a finger to correct it, so my attitude is if they start undermining your work, especially slating it so it comes out before your job, it's time to move on to something else, and that's what I'm doing.
All right. Well said. Jim, thank you so much for the time.
All right.